Good evening. My name is Pastor Gordon Anic, and I would like to welcome you to another edition of Inner Peace. Last week, I don't know if you were watching, but if you were, we offered a book, Finding Calm in the Chaos of Life. If you didn't watch last week but would like to have this book, please call the number on the screen and we will send it out to you. Tonight we are offering a little different book. It is titled How to Survive the 21st Century. And obviously we are living in the times of difficulty, in the times of economic chaos, political chaos. There is problems going on all over the world. And you know, maybe a few years ago we all thought the 21st century would be a time of prosperity and happiness. It's not necessarily turning out to be that way. So tonight we have this wonderful book by Herbert E. Douglas, How to Survive 21st Century. If you would like to receive a copy of this book, please call the number on the screen, free number, and we are going to send it out to you. When you call the number, when you call us, one of our pastors is going to answer, myself included, or one of my assistants. We would also like to have an opportunity to pray for you and your needs. So if you have any issues in your life that you're dealing with, that you need somebody's help with, please call the number and we are going to take a little time and listen to you and then also pray with you. I also want to mention, as I always do, when you call the number, you don't have to worry about anybody soliciting you or asking you for money or anything like that. That's not why we are here. We just want to help you have a stronger, deeper, more vibrant relationship with Jesus Christ. That's why we are here. So feel confident to call the number and we will do what we can to help you out. Tonight we are going to talk a little bit about this whole topic of values. And the title of the sermon is, Who Would Jesus Vote For? Obviously, in a week or so, the country, United States of America, is supposed to go out to the polls and vote for the new president, Congress, Senate. And the question is, who would Jesus vote for? This title is intended not to endorse one party or one candidate, but it is intended for us to really think about what are Christian values that we believe in and that we live by. And this program might surprise you a little bit by where I'm going to go with this, because it is probably not the same thing that you are going to hear on some of the other TV shows that feature preachers, colleagues of mine. I am coming from a perspective of what were the values of Jesus. What was it that Jesus really believed in? What was it that drove him to come and die on this earth for the human beings? If you look at Jesus, you would find out that some of his values had nothing to do with the values that we have today in America or anywhere around the world. Obviously, most people's values today have to do with money, have to do with wealth, have to do with acquiring more and more, and we have almost made a religion out of having more money. And so many people are worshiping money nowadays that they have lost a sense of what it is to be a true Christian. Christianity also, I hate to say it, but a lot of Christian faiths and Christian preachers are talking about nothing but this prosperity gospel, where they are basically teaching a false doctrine, a false teaching, which is that if you do everything according to God's will, then God is going to give you all kinds of money and blessings. And you know what? This is really not biblical. In the Bible, Jesus was very clear that on this earth we are going to have poor people with us always. Jesus was very clear that having more and more and more money is not something that he valued. Jesus also made it very clear that becoming successful in this world did not necessarily mean that the person was going to be successful in the spiritual world. So for Jesus, how we treat the poor was very important. Jesus did not look down on the poor people. He looked at them as the children of God. And he wanted the Christians to have a specific attitude towards the poor and that was the attitude of wanting to help, the attitude of wanting to be there for your neighbor. I believe that if Jesus was voting, he would look at all of these candidates and he would try to figure out which party, which candidate, which person, not just in this country, but in any country around the world, which one would do more to help out the needy and the poor. And I don't think that we have that value anymore in this country. It is true, we like to help the poor. We like to write a check to our church or to the charity. Why? Is it because we really love the poor and care for them, or is it because we are going to get a nice tax deduction at the end of the year? You have to search your own heart about it. The values of Jesus are not the same values as we have today. Jesus did not value riches. Jesus did not value wars and fighting and killing and murder. I wonder who he would pick as a commander-in-chief, a person who is promoting peace all around the world, or somebody who is trigger-happy and ready to go to war on a minute's notice. Jesus also, I believe, cared for the environment. This earth was created by God. He gave it to us to be our home, and we are basically trashing it. We are destroying it, all in the name of profit and prosperity and progress. And I wonder, what does God think when he looks down on this earth and he sees the polluted rivers and burned forests and all the damage that the human beings are doing to this handiwork of his? He made all of this with his own hands, and we are destroying it. So those are the values of Jesus. I also believe that there is another value that I absolutely need to mention. Jesus did not believe in mixing the government and religion. When he was asked about his kingdom, he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." So these are the values of Jesus, and I want to talk about them just for a minute here tonight and get you to think about what it is that you want to see in your country. A perfect candidate for Jesus, I believe, would be someone who would practice God's ethics and not human ethics. And God's ethic is different than ours is. There is a text in the Bible that I would like to start with, and this is found in Leviticus chapter 9, verse 9 to 11. I just want you to listen as I read this text and ponder it. When you reap the harvest of your land, this was the agricultural society, and they had orchards, and they had grapes, and they had all kinds of good things growing on their land. And this is what God told them: when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time to pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I'm the Lord your God. In other words, even in the Old Testament, when God took his people into the promised land, he gave them this beautiful, fertile land, and he said to them, basically what that text says is, don't be greedy. If you have a field, and that field yields all kinds of fruits and vegetables, when you go to pick them, don't pick everything. Leave a little something there in the field, because in your city there are poor people. So maybe they can come out when you're done, and maybe they can pick whatever is left over so that they can also survive. When you listen to this verse, you get an understanding of God's character. You get an understanding of God's mercy. You get an understanding of the fact that God cares for the poor. God cares for the unfortunate. God cares for those who don't have the means to feed their families. What a wonderful text. Don't be greedy. Don't go out there and pick every last fruit from your orchard. Leave some for the foreigner and the stranger and the poor. This is the Old Testament. Can you imagine if Big agricultural farms practice that today. You know, they go out there and they harvest to the last ounce. Everything that has grown, they harvest. They don't let anything go to waste. Do we take care of the poor like we should? If you're a Christian, this needs to be a centerpiece of your life. Proverbs 14:31 says, whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God. My goodness, whoever oppresses poor shows contempt for their maker. You know, let's talk about this in a way that we can all relate to. You can drive down the street and you see one of those people holding a sign, and all kinds of thoughts go through your mind. You can say to yourself, oh, they are not deserving. They're just trying to scheme me out of my money. They should go out there and find a job. Or you can think that maybe they are truly poor. You walk downtown here in Denver. If you go downtown, you see a lot of homeless people. And they are living on park benches, and they are living in the mission, and they depend on the kindness of people to feed them and take care of them. And when you walk down there, you could look at them and you could say, wow, these guys are just nothing but bums. They don't take care of themselves. They should be responsible for their life. Look at them. And maybe, just maybe, you will show a little bit of contempt for that person. Look at what this text says. Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker. If you don't care, if you say it's their fault, I don't care, I wash my hands, I'm not going to help any of these bums, you're literally showing contempt for God. Because you know what? God made all of us. From Donald Trump, who is very rich, to the poorest person on the streets, who is going through garbage cans trying to find maybe some old French fries to eat because they are so hungry. Don't show contempt for the poor, because when you do, you're also showing contempt for God, because He's the one that made them. That's what the Bible says. These are the values of Jesus. Jesus never made a difference between people. He always treated everybody the same. He didn't care if a person was a king, or if they were extremely rich, or if they were just a prostitute. He treated them the same. Those were His values. Proverbs 19:17 says, whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and He will reward them for what they have done. Whoever is kind to the poor basically gives to the Lord. I want to live in a country where we are showing kindness to the poor. I don't want to live in a country where all we are saying is how they need to take their responsibility for their own life, and they should not be mooching off of a state. And you know what? Some of that is going on, and that should be controlled and governed, and those people who abuse the system should pay the price for that. But at the same time, we should not put everybody into the same category. There are people out there who genuinely need help. There are people out there who were born into abject poverty. There are people out there who were born with all kinds of medical issues. There are people out there who never had the American dream. There are people out there who worked at the gas station or 7-Eleven or McDonald's all of their life. Now they are 78, 80 years old, and they got nothing. It's not their fault. Not everybody can be rich. And just because they're not, it doesn't mean that God didn't bless them, or God doesn't care for them, or God is punishing them. No, that's a false teaching. Life just happens. How you react to it is how God is going to judge you. How you react to those who are less fortunate than you, that is going to be used when the judgment day comes. And God is going to look at you and He's going to say, were you kind? Or were you selfish? Do not exploit the poor because they are poor. And do not crush the needy in court. That's another text. Poor people are getting exploited all over the world. You can go anywhere around the world. I went to Mexico not too long ago, a year ago, and preached a series of sermons over there. And I met some of the nicest people that you can meet. And they live in poverty. I went in the middle of the country in a farmland. And you know what? I never realized this, but Mexico is such a rich country. It has such a beautiful fields and fertility. And I mean, the land is just amazing. And I asked those people over there, how come your country is so rich and yet all of you are so poor? And every single person that I asked this question, they all said the same thing to me. The government is corrupt. The government is corrupt. The government is allowing the big corporations to oppress and exploit the poor. They can come, they can take my land, they can pay me any price that they want to pay me for my crops, and there is nothing I can do. The Bible says, do not exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the needy in court. Does that matter to you? Does it matter to you who is going to be, what kind of a president we are going to have in this country? Is it the person who really cares for the poor? Or is it the person who just cares for the people at the very top? And you know what? We have a history of presidents who generally, both Democrats and Republicans, who generally tend to care more for the rich than they care for the poor. Unfortunately, a lot of that has been happening in this country. Isaiah 58, 6-8 says, is not this kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. That's what God is looking for, to deliver those who are oppressed, to untie the cords of yoke, to help out those who are less fortunate. Is it not to share your food with the hungry? You know, they were fasting and they were worshiping God and they were doing all kinds of things to please God. And God says to them, look, all of these things that you are trying to do, that's not what I want. I'm not asking for that. The kind of fasting and the kind of worship that I want, God says to them, is to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter. When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. God says to them, look, you can go to your fancy churches. It's amazing how many fancy churches we have in this country anymore. Mega churches. Thousands of people, they go in there with fancy cars and they're worshiping God and they have these wonderful praise bands and they sometimes sound better than the professional bands out there. And you go in there and they just make you feel wonderful. And God says basically, look, thank you for that kind of worship. It's all nice. But what I really want is for you to share your food with the hungry, to clothe the stranger, to be concerned about the person that nobody is willing to stand for. Then God says, then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. You know what this text says? This text says, if a country takes care of the least fortunate, widows and orphans and homeless and retired people, senior citizens, people in the nursing homes, people who desperately need medical care. If a country does that, God says, then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. In other words, God is saying, if you take care of the poor and the needy and the sick, I'm going to take care of your country. That's what He says. That's His values. then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. My goodness. God is not asking us to get richer. God is not asking us to have more ships and airplanes and horses and bayonets. He's not asking for those things. He's asking us to take care of those who need to be taken care of. And if we do that, He says, then I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to take care of you. What should be the priority of our country? If we truly say we are a Christian country built on a Judeo-Christian principles, well, this is Judeo-Christian principles. Everything that I have read so far is out of the Old Testament. It's definitely Judaic principles. I didn't even get to Jesus yet. We are still in the Old Testament. Ezekiel 22 says, the people of the land practice extortion and commit robbery. They oppress the poor and needy and mistreat the foreigner, denying them justice. And then God says, I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it, but I have found none. God says they are oppressing the poor. There is no justice. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. And if they start complaining, they get stomped. And God says, I'm looking for somebody who is going to take cause of the land, the cause of the unfortunate, the cause of those who are suffering. And He says, I can't find anybody like that. He says, I'm looking for somebody like that so that I don't have to destroy that land. Does that apply to us too? Do you think that maybe one of the reasons why we are going through so many troubles in the United States is because we have been too insensitive, uncaring to the needs of those amongst us who are not doing as good as we are? Do you think we have become too hard on people who are suffering? And maybe God is saying, you know what, until you guys figure that out, I'm just going to stay out of your business and you deal with all of the issues that you have to. I believe we need to become a country, go back to the idea of helping your neighbor, of being there for your neighbor. Jesus says, and now I'm finally getting to Jesus. Luke 14, He says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me because He has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. That's what Jesus said. Jesus basically said that His purpose for coming here on this earth was to help the poor and set the oppressed free. What kind of country do you want to have? Do you want to have a country where only one group of people is doing well and everybody else, well, you know what, deal with it? And this is really not just only about who is going to be the president in Congress. This is also about who are you. This is also about how you live your life. This is also about what your values are. What are your values? Are you a Christian in the way that Jesus was? Or are you practicing this perverted version of Christianity that has nothing to do with mercy and justice? Which one are you? Where do you stand? I just want to encourage every one of us to really try to understand who Jesus was and what He was all about. Jesus stood on the side of the poor. Jesus stood on the side of separation of church and state. Jesus stood on the side of peace and not on the side of war. Jesus stood on the side of the environment and not on the side of pollution and destruction. Jesus stood on the side of the little guy, not on the side of the big guy. Which side are you standing on? How is what's going to happen here in a week going to affect your life? How is it going to affect the history of our country? Are we going to continue to be a country that only cares about, hey, let me just make as much money as I can? Or are we going to say, look, we need to enter a new age where we pay attention to those who are less fortunate, who are suffering? Job of the church, of the Christian church, should be to lead people to Jesus. It should not be to legislate the morality. It should not be to get involved in the government. It should not be to pass out the laws that benefit the church. It should be to lead people to Jesus Christ. And whether you like it or not, some of you are not going to like this sermon that I preached tonight, but whether you like it or not does not change the fact of who Jesus was and what he stood for and what he believed in. It just doesn't change that fact. Jesus is who he is. He did what he did. And as a Christian, do you even know what he stood for? And that's why I preach this message today, so that you would start understanding who Jesus really was and what his teaching really is. Because that's what it means to be Christian. It means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. I know that maybe this was a hard sermon for some, but I felt that it needed to be said, because everybody is out there speaking out their mind in all kinds of language. And I feel, you know what, if we are living in a country where we have the freedom of speech, then go out there and say what's on your heart. And that's what I did tonight. I hope that you will vote. It's important. As somebody who is a naturalized citizen, I love the opportunity to vote. Back in the old country, in communism, we only had one candidate, always. You couldn't vote for more than one guy, so it was always rigged. Now we don't have that anymore. In this country, you can vote your conscience, and you can try to make the decision, I hope, based on what the values of Jesus are. God bless you, and I sure hope to see you next Sunday evening.